Thank you very much, Chris. Coming up after the break, Arthur Fleischmann, author of a powerful new book called Carly's Voice. When his daughter was only 2 years old, she was diagnosed with autism and told she would never develop intellectually beyond the abilities of a small child. Then one day, she found her voice. Good morning, everybody. 12 minutes past 8 o'clock now. Arthur Fleischmann is here. He is the co-author of Carly's Voice, Breaking Through Autism. Good morning.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Our pleasure. And I say co-author because you wrote this with your daughter, Carly.
Indeed, yeah.
Who was diagnosed with autism. She's a twin, is that correct? And was diagnosed with autism at age 2, but you knew sooner than that, did you not?
Yeah, I think we probably knew pretty much in the first few minutes. She just looked different than Taryn. And as the months went by I'd say about 4 or 5 months, we could really see some pretty huge behavioral differences. Carly cried a lot. She didn't pass through any of the milestones in the first, 6 months or a year. So we kind of knew right away something.
If you didn't have the twin to compare her with, would it have been a longer diagnostic
I think
road?
so. Yeah, I think so. As we went to like her general pediatrician, he would say, "Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
You're young parents. These things take time." Now she has an older brother, so we did have some benchmark, and we could tell by a year or 2 years what a child should be doing. But I think you're right. Having a precocious twin made it even harder.
What was the diagnosis officially at age 2? What were you told?
At 2, we were told autism, PDD, GDD, so global developmental delay and pervasive developmental delay, and autism. And then over the months and years, we picked up a few more acronyms and phrases. So she was diagnosed with oral motor apraxia, which prevents speech in her case. Cognitive delay, I think they probably used a less delicate term in those days. So it was a pretty bleak diagnosis.
Her growth, cognitive and otherwise, the doctor said it would essentially stop at what age?
At about age 6. I mean, they said that we could probably expect her to be a 6-year-old, and they tried to make that, a good thing, because 6-year-olds can, generally basically take care of themselves. They can feed themselves.
But she would never speak to you.
But she would never speak, right.
During that time, so there was absolutely no communication up until that time?
Well, as a small child, she could always make her needs known. She would gesture, point to things. She had a few very simple words in the early days, that we could understand: juice and cracker, that kind of thing. And she was really good at getting what she wanted. Like, she would scramble, to a cupboard, drag a chair, climb up. So you knew sort of the basics, hungry, that kind of thing, but you never knew what was going on inside. We never could hear what was disturbing her, why she was crying, or how she felt, and we never had any of the kind of connection that you have with a small child.
What have you learned from her now that she has been able to communicate through the computer?
Can you tell people how that happened the first time that she reached out?
Yeah, so Carly is a series of breakthroughs, and we haven't even seen the last of them, I'm sure. So we kept going with therapy all the way through, years 2 through 10. We did a lot of behavioral therapy called ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis, speech-language therapy, occupational therapy, and we used a device called an augmentative communication device, which is not dissimilar to an iPad today, where she could touch pictures and it would say the word for her, but it also had a keyboard on it. And one day, while she was working with Barb and Howie, 2 of her therapists, she typed out, "Help, teeth hurt." And then she threw up. And much later in the final chapter of the book, which she wrote, she said she was feeling sick that day but didn't have the language yet to say nauseated. And so that was the first breakthrough. And then over the coming months, she would tell us more and more. And it would take years before we would truly understand why she jumped around and slapped herself and banged the tables and so forth. But then she would go on to describe, "It feels like I have ants crawling on my arms and my legs are on fire, and I'm jumping to kind of put out the fire, and I'm banging because I feel like a can of Coke all shaken up and I need to explode." But that took years for us to get out.
Extraordinary, though, because autism is such a mystery to people, and for Carly to be able to give an actual voice to why she's doing what she's doing, it is such a breakthrough.
Right, and it helps us with other kids, and it helps, I mean, very selfishly, it helped us with the doctors. We could say to them, let's try something for restless leg. Well, no, let's try it. And we tried it, and, you know, Requip put out the fire in her legs.
Well, I was going to say, at some stage you must have lost a certain amount of faith in conventional medical knowledge and known that you had a child that was out ahead of the curve. You know, leading you out ahead of the curve.
Yeah, but we're really lucky. We work with Dr. Wendy Roberts, and she's got to be Canada's top specialist in autism, and she's the most incredible doctor, incredible person I've ever met.
But you didn't get to her right away.
Carly saw her pretty early on. Now, that's not to say that all the doctors have the tools, so you just have to have, you know, a bit of patience and faith and tenacity to keep looking.
Exactly. It's still so mysterious. I want to jump ahead in the story a little bit because can you explain why Carly reached out to Ellen DeGeneres?
Yeah, so we're Jewish, and kids have bar bat mitzvahs at age 12 or 13, and Carly can't speak, but she wanted to write a little speech. So at that point, we thought a speech would be a bit of a stretch because she had only been writing short phrases, but a speech she did, and she sat down and over a period of 3 months wrote a wonderful speech, and she said, I want someone special to read it for me, and I'd like that person to be Ellen. Again, we didn't even know she knew who Ellen was, but Ellen, she says, would get her because Ellen has also had to go through a period of her life where she was marginalized, and Ellen makes her laugh and so forth. So we threw 6 degrees of separation.
We have the clip of Ellen talking about Carly.
There's a little girl in Toronto. Her name is Carly. She's 13 years old, and she's autistic. And she asked me to speak for her bat mitzvah because she doesn't speak. And she wrote something for me to speak for her, which was the most beautiful thing. I could hardly keep it together when I was reading it. And she has been writing me thank you notes ever since. And she wrote me another one recently, and it says, they say that one of the greatest gifts in the world is someone's voice, and I can't believe it, but you lent me yours.
That is it's so expressive, and again, it speaks to how little we know about autism. That we're surprised that they're able to express themselves that way.
Yeah, there's a notion of theory of mind, which kids with autism supposedly don't have. And theory of mind is the ability to understand what empathy, essentially, read facial cues and so forth. And there is some indication that girls with autism have a greater theory of mind than boys, but what Carly wants you to know is we all have the capacity. I mean, Carly absolutely feels. At a very young age, her therapist, one of her therapists, lost her mom, and Carly, the very first thing she wrote was, I'm sorry to hear about your mom's passing, which was, I don't know if her twin would have written that at age 11 years old. So.
And what we saw in the montage, just going to break, was that she recognizes that she's different and can't do things that other people can do. She has that recognition.
And she finds that very painful, right? I mean, she would like to do everything that her twin sister does. She would like to date, and she'd like to hang out with friends, and she does as much as she can. She goes to a mainstream high school now. She's enrolled in gifted classes. She earns 90+ averages. She wants to go to UCLA. Like, she has enormous, audacious goals, and I just hope I have the energy, and my wife has the energy to make them happen.
What would you tell parents?
Oh, you know
what that hopeless feeling is.
Yeah, it is it's a fine line. You have to decide whether you're going to slip into the abyss of hopelessness and just go, you know, if I have to, I'll have to place her in a group home, which is what had been recommended to us, or I'm going to fight. I'm just going to fight. Every day, I'm not even going to consider the option. I'm just going to get as much therapy. I will sink into debt if I have to. We'll just keep plugging away. And I would say to parents, do the best you can. I mean, you can't beat up on yourself. You only have a limited number of resources, both financial and physical, but if you can muster the strength, the help from family and friends, great therapists, you just keep plugging, because I think these kids all have enormous potential beyond what you see on the surface.
It's just, you know, just hats off to you as a parent, and you know how exhausting it can be every day just in general, and for you to be doing all of this and to have given this voice to Carly, which will give voice to other people as well in her same situation, is really quite astounding. The book is called Carly's Voice, Breaking Through Autism. Arthur Fleischmann wrote that along with his daughter Carly. Great speaking to you this morning.
Thanks very much for having me on.
20 after 8. We'll take a break. We'll be back in just a moment. It's just...